Okay, hi everybody. We are here today with Skip Hardy, who is one of four partners at Walnut Ridge Dairy in Lansing, New York. And Skip, we're really looking forward to having you talk with us today about what farming is like during the pandemic. Skip farms nearly 2,200 acres. Is that right, Skip?
Yes, that's correct. I should say I and everybody involved on the farm do. I don't really do all that much work.
You don't do all the physical labor yourself.
You got that right, yes.
I got that right. So do you and all four of your partners chip in with the work, or are some of you more business guys than others, or how does that work?
So technically I'm kind of the retiring senior partner. I give advice. They don't always have to take it. But my three partners one of them has been a partner with me since 1988, one since 2000, one since 2012. They each have different areas of responsibility. My most senior partner is a general manager. The next partner happens to be the person in charge of all the crops and machinery. And then the most recent person is the herd manager in charge of all the cows and everything that goes along with that.
And about how many cows do you have?
Roughly 1,600 cows, and then roughly 1,200. We call them young stock. You know, they're not cows yet. They haven't had a calf. They are growing every day. We feed them every day. Eventually, they become cows.
And so it's about half and half. About half of them are full grown-up cows, and then the rest of them are not.
My definition: a cow is when they've had a baby, because that's when they start producing milk. Until they've had a baby, they don't produce any milk, and that is that's the young stock. That's, you know, in human beings, that's like
same thing.
Yeah, exact same way. Yep,
exact same way. Okay, and so how do you feed your cows? Well, and all the animals. What do you feed them?
So we grow basically two kinds of crops on our farm. One is corn, one is alfalfa, grass mixture. We harvest the corn once a year. It's an annual. The alfalfa grass mixture we harvest 4 or 5 times a year. Both of those things are stored in our silos, and that allows us to feed the cows on a very regular routine diet. We actually have a nutritionist who looks at all our feed and decides what makes sense for us to feed. So it's, as long as we're on the subject of feeding, we actually buy a lot of cornmeal, which is just the same cornmeal we make muffins with. We also feed a lot of byproducts to our animals, cottonseed, distiller's grains. In other words, when they make booze and they got the grains left over, the cows like that. Sometimes we'll feed brewer's grains, that's the beer. And
you'll take that leftover after it's used. It's a way to use up the refuse, huh?
Exactly right. It's recycling.
That's great. That's great. And okay, about how much of you and I were chatting yesterday, and you told me that there's some portion of your feed that you grow on your property, on your acreage, and then there's some portion that you have to truck in.
Right.
What kind of the proportions there?
So a cow is a ruminant. A ruminant can digest fiber that humans can't. So the more fibrous materials that we feed a cow that they can digest, we grow that, because we literally feed 8 or 10 tons of that a day. So that's 365 days a year. It would be really cost prohibitive because of the trucking to truck that in from very far. So on the 2,200 acres of land that we either own or rent, we grow that very fibrous crop, the corn silage and the alfalfa grass mixture.
That's corn, and then you grind up the whole corn stalk, right? You take the whole thing, feed that to
everything but the roots. It all gets ground up and chopped very fine. It's put in a big pile. It's packed very tightly. It's covered with plastic. It's weighted down so that oxygen can't get there. It actually goes through a fermentation process, and that's what actually keeps it from spoiling. And that's what
my dad is a pig crop farmer in Colorado, and he grows that silage corn.
Absolutely.
And I've been there when they they come through with the tractor and grind up the entire plant. All of a sudden, your entire cornfield is gone, and it's all been hauled off to feed the animals. Yeah.
Yep.
And so, when you truck it in, where do you have to get it from? Like how far in do you have to truck it from?
Well, we have fields. I mean, I can look out the window and see some of our fields. The fields farthest away are about 10 miles away. And so when it's harvest time, we have trucks on the road bringing the food, the feed here to the farm where it's stored year round. That's kind of normal course of business. When you're harvesting, you've got trucks on the road bringing feed back from the fields.
Do you think that, I mean, you're a fairly large farm for New York. New York has smaller farms than the rest of the country does. I mean, I think I've got this right. There's about 4,000 farms, dairy farms in New York, and there may be 150 head is kind of the average size farm. And so you're bigger than that. But in California, for example, there are hundreds of farms that are like 2,500 head, 5,000 head, much larger scale production. Do you think that here in New York, where the farms are smaller, do a lot of farmers do what you're doing and grow a chunk of the feed on their property, or how does that usually work?
So I would say our operation is fairly typical. If you're smaller, you might not have to go as far, or if you're larger, you might have to go further. But couple of the reasons why it's not just California, but they're the best known for larger farms. It's climate. I mean, you can always count on the climate there. It's land base. You can go, I mean, a big field in our part of the world is 50, 60 acres. That's a big field. Out there, that would be peanuts. They have 200, 400 acre fields, and they have one right after the other. So it's not unusual to have massive land base right close to the farm. So it's land base, it's climate, and it's also weather. Climate as well, water. So when when you need rain out there, they just hit the switch, the irrigation comes on, and you have water. So there's a reason. It's just easier, quite frankly, to in some ways farm in that part of the world. Not always.
Well, not always. Where my parents farm, it's getting water is really tough. You often get a blessing of water from the sky here, but in Colorado, where my parents farm, they have to bring water in through either an irrigation system. My dad has a center pivot. He has one of those huge pieces of land like you're talking about. I think it's maybe 250 acres per section there, and puts a center pivot on the middle of it, and that's how they get their water.
Oh yeah, but he can shut his water off.
He can shut his water off. That's true.
And it's, I'm just saying, actually, I'm looking at the window outside and it's starting to cloud up and I see a few drops on them. We don't need any more rain right now. Stop with the rain. But
you've got enough. You've got your crops.
Today we got plenty.
You got plenty. So we're starting to see small farms go under. I was just looking at the numbers from last year, and the average size of a farm went up by almost 10%, but also about 10% of farms across the country went out of business last year. So that means that farms are getting bigger. What do you think that means for the kind of farming we do in upstate New York? I worry about us getting squeezed out. What are you seeing?
So first of all, the trend towards fewer farms has gotten worse recently because of the economics of dairy farming, but it has been, for the last 100 years, that has been a very steady progression. New York State in 1900, I wasn't around then, had roughly 100,000 dairy farms in our state. New York was the #1 state for dairy in the United States. Today we're #4. Idaho just passed us. So it's been something that's been happening right along. Now, there's been 4 to 5 years of really terrible milk prices. Terrible meaning if it cost me $20 to make 100 pounds of milk, I was getting paid $16 or $17 or $18. So I lost money. We lost money every time, every day. But part of the problem is it's not a tap you can turn on and turn off. And it's not like you can go, well, I'm going to get out of the dairy business. I'm going to go into the beef business. You are committed to being a dairy farmer for quite a while, if that's what you decide you want to do. So,
because you put so much investment into your land and your animals and infrastructure.
Here's the other thing, Leslie, that I really think people need to understand, and that is, I have two phenomenal dairy farmers south of me. They have 50 cows roughly each. I got a phenomenal dairy farmer just north of me. He has 4,000 cows. We all work together. We all, can I borrow your equipment? Hey, so it's, the competition is only when there's something for sale that we want to buy. And then that's where, unfortunately, the smaller farm has more difficulty getting financing for a large purchase. So.
We have a family story about my dad wanting to buy a tractor. He saw a good deal on a tractor, and it was a Sunday afternoon, and he knew he wanted to buy that tractor, but the bank wasn't open to be able to do the financing for the tractor. And so he figured out a way to finance it that afternoon, but he wasn't going to leave the tractor there on the other guy's lot. So he drove the tractor home about 40 miles, going 4 or 5 miles an hour all the way home. It took him the whole day, but by the end of it, he had that tractor. He wasn't going to let that go. Somebody else might have bought it.
Possession is 9/10 of the law, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So my wife actually has a quote. I want to make sure I stick in here. Large and small, there's a place for all. And that's really the truth. There isn't a push by anybody in the dairy business to have small farmers go out of business. There's a lot more of them than there are larger farmers. They are the fabric of our communities. And they're just, nobody wants them to go out of business, but it's economics, plain and simple. And that's what's really difficult.
And so what's been the economics recently? I've watched the price of milk a little bit, and it looks like the price of milk was starting to go back up. It was really challenging for a while there, and it was just starting to go back up, and then we hit the COVID crisis. So what's going on there, Skip?
So it's milk is a commodity, so it is supply and demand, and quite frankly, there was a great demand and not as good a supply in 2014. It was a banner year for profitability on every dairy farm. But at the end of 2014, people were really taking advantage of those high prices. They started milking more cows. And then what happened was the supply exceeded the demand. And quite frankly, it went on 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 is when it started there were signs that it was going to be improving. And sure enough, in 2020, the supply demand started to come back in balance. There was a lot of international demand, and the price of milk started to creep up towards where it was profitable. And then Mr. COVID came along.
And so how has that affected you? What's happened there? On
our farm, our single most important asset is our employees, no doubt about it. And that's right today, that's our biggest concern. How do we keep our employees? How do we keep our community? How do we keep ourselves safe? So we're practicing all the things that we should be practicing, without a doubt.
That's part of why I'm visiting with you here by Skype.
There you go.
I would much prefer to be visiting you in person there. Yeah.
I'd love that. I was going to say, I'd love to have you come down once we don't have to wear masks and stay away from each other. So short term, that's the biggest concern. The day that there are no employees, if there's no employees on the farm today, there's no milk leaving this farm tomorrow. There's no way the owners can do the amount of work that is required. We have 25, 26 employees. 2/3 at least of those are just working with the animals. And that is absolutely a huge risk to us. So keeping our employees, our men and women that work here with us, safe is like number one.
Mm.
So
you're there in your milking parlor now, right?
Yes.
That's where you're sitting in like a little antechamber. Do you think you could pick up your screen to show us what's on the other side there? Because this sort of would give us a sense of where we are. Okay, so there's your milking parlor. Yeah, tell us about that.
This is our rotary milking parlor. There are 60 stalls on there, and if I stop moving this around, on the far side, the animals come in on their own, and there are 4 people at 4 different stations here. I can show you that gentleman right down there is actually putting the machines on each cow. If I go down like this, maybe you can see there, the cows are standing, actually being milked with the machine on there. And if you follow all the way around, and then the cows get off on the far side.
And they're getting off and then they're walking back out. So you have employees, when you were talking about your employees, you have employees who are helping manage each stage of this. That takes a lot of people to manage all this.
It takes 4 people to actually be in the milking parlor, and it takes 2 more people to actually be out in the barn, either bringing cows to the milking parlor or taking cows back to the pen they belong in. And they have other jobs they do, those 2 people do too, but 6 people, we milk 3 times a day. So it takes about roughly 5.5 to 6 hours to milk. It's a constant process.
And how often does each cow milk? I know this, but I'd like you to share it with our viewers.
Every cow gets milked 3 times a day, every day, while they are lactating. Unless you want me to go into the physiology of the cow, they don't lactate, they don't milk the last 2 months of the pregnancy. And that's a very normal practice. And we call those cows dry cows. They are in a different part of the barn. So.
But yet they're still eating and they still need to be taken care of. And so you still got employees who are watching out. So even if you were to, stop milking your cows or something in a crisis like this, there's no way to stop doing what you're doing in order to save costs or to somehow cut back in a pandemic, for example.
Not at all. First of all, the biology of that cow is she needs to be milked. She needs to get that milk out of her body, or else that can make her very sick. So, I mean, that's priority number 2, is to have those cows be milked on a regular basis in a relaxed, calm, easygoing manner. We don't want the cows to be uptight. We want them just to, they like getting in, and I didn't point this out, they love getting on this milking parlor. Cows are kind of social. And if you could see it, they were actually looking across at the buddies who were either just getting on or just getting off. It's a wild ride.
Do you find that I don't know, it's too much. Do they buddy up? Do they like to be near each other? Certain ones don't like each other? Yeah.
Yep. They definitely have individual behaviors. Some cows really want to get on the milking rotary parlor quickly. Other cows kind of like wait till the end, and they go back to where they actually, pens where they actually eat, sleep, drink.
They have personalities, just like
us. Absolutely. Yeah. Yep.
So what do you think could be done? I mean, obviously it's not possible for you to stop production, to like put your whole enterprise on hold in this pandemic. Is there something that could be done to help you out? What would help you get through this?
Well, I mean, one of the huge issues as a dairy farmer, I know I feel this way, and I know every dairy farmer feels this way, and that is because the supply chain interruption is so huge, we aren't able to get enough of what the consumer wants today onto the grocery store, onto the grocery shelves, because the supply chain just doesn't move quick enough. It can't. So eventually we'll get there. Eventually we'll, because we're all eating at home, we're not going out to restaurants, the kids aren't in
so
school,
you'll shift, like you won't sell to the people you used to sell to, you'll sell to grocery stores instead, or whatever it is.
Yes, yep. But that's like a huge freighter out in the ocean turning a corner. They don't turn corners very quickly. Supply systems don't either. So Leslie, I've really thought about this. All I can say is the more food that can be given to people in any way, shape, or form, however it happens, I would say that every dairy farmer in the United States would love to have that happen. That would be absolutely phenomenal. So, but we quite frankly don't have it within our power to do that. I mean, our farm belongs to a small co-op, and our small co-op, markets the milk in where it best is able to get the best price. But for that whole dang huge pile of people and milk and cows and machinery to start producing over here, here's an example. So normally right now, this is, beginning of summer, right? And what do we do in the summertime? We eat a lot of ice cream. So what do the ice cream manufacturers do, say in maybe February, but March, April, May, is they make the big tubs of ice cream. They really stop making the small stuff because, that demand is going to kind of go down as we start going to the ice cream stores and go up. So what happened with this, with the virus coming, people are wanting to buy the ice cream from the grocery store. But the ice cream manufacturers for months have been making these big 3-gallon tubs of ice cream for the ice cream store. So it's
it's hard to shift that production to what the new demand is. It's not like turning off a switch. You can't just
absolutely.
Yeah. Yep. I read a story about there's some cheese producers that are buying up dumped milk. Farmers have had to dump their milk because these cows are producing milk, and what are you going to do with it if you don't have a place to sell it? Well, you have to dump it. But there's some cheese producers who are buying up dumped milk and creating cheese that then can be given to food banks. And like you're saying, get people who need it. Did we freeze here? I think we might have frozen. Let's see.
Now I hear you.
Yeah, we're back. Okay, good. Anyway, I was just commenting that there's cheese manufacturers who are trying to get, and that's what you're talking about, is right now there are people who need food and there is milk that's being produced. And if we can just figure out how to link those two up, that would keep our dairy farmers in business, and it would also solve one of the problems we've got. Right?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Well, listen. I think we're gonna wrap up here, but I do want to just recognize that this week is Earth Week. It's Earth Day coming up, and farmers in a lot of ways are some of the original conservation land stewards that we've had in this country, dating back to the 1700s when we first began farming. There used to be more of a sense, I think, than there is now, that you have to stay in touch with the land. But I'm curious, what are your thoughts as we move into Earth Week about the farmer's role in land conservation?
So I think in the last 30 or 40 years, there's been a shift away from, well, my father was a dairy farmer, I'm going to be a dairy farmer. I think that's still somewhat prevalent, there's no doubt about it, but I think nowadays it's more, I want to be a dairy farmer, I'm going to find an existing dairy farm and go on that farm. And that new blood coming in has really kind of said, we need to protect the soil. Not that the old blood didn't, that new blood says, what technologies are out there that we can go ahead and stop soil erosion, start cover cropping, reduce the carbon footprint. Let's try to get to net zero carbon emissions. And it's, quite frankly, it's really exciting. It is, I need to back up a little bit. It's not that the old people we're resisting that. But I think that there has just been such a push from the outside to say, there's things we can do in this business that we probably weren't aware of. And that's really, I mean, so here's some of the things we do on our farm. We inject our manure. We annually soil test. We have a nutrient management plan. We no-till plant. We have sod waterways. We strip crop. We have cover crops. We have machines. Our tractors have GPS auto steer. I mean, just each of those are expensive. So it's not like you can just say, oh yeah, let's go do that. It's an investment. It pays off over time, but it is, I mean, that is the way of the future. This conservation of everything. Soil being absolutely critical in that equation.
That's tremendous. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us, Skip. I've learned a lot here, and I think that it's important for all of us to know what it is that our dairy farmers are doing, because really you're the backbone of our ag economy in upstate New York. And I appreciate you taking the time to get us educated.
You're very welcome. Anytime you actually want to do this live, I would much rather, I'm sure we all would much rather than that.
I'd love to come out there. We both have to be wearing masks, but you know, we can shout at each other across a field. There's that too.
There you go.
Yeah.
Thank you for this
opportunity. Looking forward to it. Take good care. Thank you, Skip.
All right. Bye-bye.